At this present time, Japan is attempting to control the awesome power of its nuclear reactors that have powered the nation for the last 40 years. An amazing Old Testament prophecy foretold the invention of the nuclear bomb over 2,500 years ago. We'll look at that prophecy and talk about the future of nuclear war on today's edition of Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it. The eyes of the entire world are focused on the developments in Japan today. It's been quite a horrific story. First of all, of course, it was the massive earthquake, the fourth largest earthquake recorded since 1900. It was an earthquake 9.0 on the Richter scale. It wreaked havoc. It then created the tsunami, which came dashing into the shores of Japan. As of right now, the death toll looks like it will exceed 10,000, most of them from the tsunami, not from the earthquake itself. And then you add to all of that the damage done to the nuclear reactors. There's 6 in all that were damaged by the earthquake, first of all, and then the following tsunami. And they've been fighting that fire for now 5 days or so, and it looks like right now that they are losing the battle. The headlines read something like this: Japan spent fuel pond on fire, radioactivity out of control, radiation level soars after Japan nuke plant fire. Another headline: radiation leaps after reactor fire. Tokyo gets warning. Next headline: radioactive winds blowing towards Tokyo. Next, radiation fears spark panic evacuations in Tokyo. And then an article said, get out now. Japan nuclear crisis triggers online panic. Now, those are just a small sampling of the headlines that are being experienced. Nuclear power is an amazing thing. It is clean energy as long as there's no malfunctions. There have been a couple of nuclear disasters prior to what we're experiencing right now. We had 3 Mile Island here in the United States of America. The largest one by far was the Chernobyl nuclear accident. In order for us to perhaps appreciate a little bit what happened or what is happening right now in Japan, I want to go over what happened at Chernobyl in April the 26th of 1986. Before we do that, however, I want to make sure that you understand that there's a God in heaven who knows the end from the beginning. And I'd like to read for you a prophecy of the effects of a nuclear weapon in Zechariah chapter 14, verse 12. For those of you that may not be familiar with this passage, in Zechariah 14 is devoted to the battle of Armageddon. In verse number 2 of Zechariah 14, the Lord said, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. Then it goes on to say, the houses shall be destroyed, the women shall be ravished. And then finally in verse 4, it records the coming of Jesus Christ to fight against the world community, the nations of the world that will be coming down against Israel at that time. Jesus goes forth and fight against them, and that's when we will crown Jesus Christ King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now that's a quick overview of the Battle of Armageddon. However, it goes on down in the book of Zechariah to talk about the fact that there will be nuclear bombs exchanged during the Battle of Armageddon. That shouldn't surprise us. We know that Israel has maybe as high as 200 nuclear weapons. They actually call their nuclear program the Samson option. If you know the story of Samson, when he went down, he took the whole house down with him. He refused to go down peacefully, and of course they've called the nuclear program in Israel the Samson option, because they are determined they will never again march off submissively to Hitler's gas chambers or anyone else's gas chambers. They're simply sending a message to the world. If we go down, we're taking the whole house of cards down with us. So they're actually going to end up, somebody's going to use nuclear weapons at the Battle of Armageddon. Apparently, Israel is going to be so endangered that the nuclear weapon will be brought into play, perhaps by Israel, perhaps it will be the Samson option. Let me just read this to you, and you judge for yourself. If you've ever read any literature about the effects of nuclear fallout after Hiroshima or Nagasaki, then you're going to recognize what I'm going to read to you. But this passage was written about 500 BC. It's Zechariah chapter 14, verse 12. Now, this is commentary about the Battle of Armageddon that has just taken place. Listen to it. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. If you've read the accounts of the aftermath of Hiroshima, it's just like you're reading from one of those books. I read recently a little book entitled Hiroshima, and a man talked about reaching out to shake hands with another man and pulling away the man's skin as he pulled his hand back. Also of the flesh just seemingly melting off of the bone as people were standing there. And then also the eyes were consumed in the sockets. That's the effect of nuclear radiation. And this was written 550 BC. Zechariah 14 and 12. So it's prophesied in the Bible the amazing power of nuclear war, the amazing power of the nuclear bomb or the nuclear reactor. Right now, Japan is fighting that beast, trying to keep it in its cage. In its cage, it can serve mankind. It's been generating electricity for Japan for 40 years. But if it ever leaps out of control, it can burn your entire house down. In order to understand what's going on in Japan right now, let's go now to what happened at the world's worst ever nuclear accident. There was, I believe, 10 times as much nuclear radioactivity released at Chernobyl as was released at the bombing in Hiroshima. Hiroshima, I believe, killed about 100,000 people. One bomb, 100,000 people. To read the accounts is just beyond humanness. So here's the, let me tell you first of all about what happened at Chernobyl. On April the 26th, about 1:30 in the morning, one of the scientists at Chernobyl decided to conduct an experiment. And he disabled certain of the safety features in order for this experiment to be conducted. Then he ordered the rods to be lowered, which begins the nuclear reaction to generate the power. After about 30-some seconds, he realized that there was something wrong, that events were spinning out of control. He ordered the rods raised back up to stop the reaction. However, the heat had become so great they had warped and they couldn't get them back up. Well, it wasn't long until there was this terrific explosion. It blew the lid off of the reactor and it came back down. I think the lid weighed about maybe 1,000,000 pounds or something like that. It came back down cocked, leaving the atmosphere exposed to a full nuclear fire. Well, then the second explosion hit, and it drove radioactive material a mile into the sky. The winds caught the radioactive cloud and drove it north into Sweden, into Italy, into Germany, through Great Britain, and then finally out over the Atlantic Ocean toward the United States of America. Now, the result of that particular nuclear accident, well, the first thing that happened was people on site paid the price. I'm sure we're going to be reading some stories. I just saw a special on CNN, and it was labeled "Heroes Fight the Fire." And so there are people there right now that probably will not live long after this experience, but they are there fighting the fire, trying to save the nation of Japan from what would happen if a full nuclear meltdown did in fact occur. And we're not sure that that's not happening even as I speak right now. So what happened was at Chernobyl, when this nuclear fire happened, nobody knew what was going on for sure, and one particular man opened one door and found himself staring in the face of a full nuclear fire. The heat was so powerful, he quickly slammed the door shut, and then, as he was trained to do, fell on the floor because, of course, heat rises and the coolest air is going to be on the floor. Once the heat had dissipated, because the lid was now off of the reactor, he was able to get up, and with the help of a co-worker, they made their way down to the first aid station about a block away. As they were walking toward the first aid station, they looked in some mirrors that they passed to see their skin hanging from their arms in ribbons. That was the effect that nuclear exposure had on them so very quickly. Well, those two men didn't live long. They died a few days later. The firefighters came, not realizing they were fighting a full nuclear fire, and most of them died within 30 days or so as a result of being there trying to fight the fire. In addition to that, all of the fire trucks that were on site had to be buried in order to get rid of the continuing radiation, and then the bulldozers that buried the fire trucks had to be buried. The city nearby of 40,000 people, where most of the workers of Chernobyl lived, that city became totally uninhabitable. About 40,000 people lived there, and to my knowledge, it's still not being inhabited today. What are we right now, 25 years later? In the meantime, as the nuclear cloud moved away from Chernobyl and moved into Europe, there were incessant rains. Now, whether those rains were caused by the nuclear explosion or not, I don't know, but it rained incessantly for the next 4 to 5 days. The problem was the rains that came down were filled with the nuclide cesium-137. And when people drank from the waters of Europe, unknowingly they were ingesting cesium-137, and that caused them to have cancer. We'll be back.
Every Monday at 9 p.m. Central on the Church Channel and at 10 p.m. Central on Daystar, Irvin Baxter presents End of the Age. End of the Age is a 30-minute program which gives intricate details about how Bible prophecy is not only true, but also how it lines up so perfectly with events going on in the world right now. Don't miss one End of the Age program every Monday at 9 p.m. Central on the Church Channel and at 10 p.m. Central on Daystar. Visit endtime.com for more details or call 1-800-ENDTIME.
When you think about Bible prophecy or the end of the world, what comes to mind? War, destruction, famine, disease, 666, mark of the beast, antichrist, false prophet, 4 horsemen, trumpets, seals, and vials. What about 2012? How does all of this affect you as a teenager in today's world? Those are all good questions, but the thing to remember is that Bible prophecy was not put here for us to be afraid of it, but for us to know what is to come. When I was a kid, I used to pretend that I could see the future and predict what